Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com. We are back again on Past the Wire TV with our friend Ray DeStefano. We had a great conversation last week. Ray has joined us again. We got racetrack tales and stories galore. Ray, welcome back. It was great chatting last week. Great stories. The buzzer story is a classic. And you know what's interesting is that right after we did that this week, there's been a whole whirlwind of innuendos flying around on social media that some jockeys at Monmouth Park were complaining about other jockeys at Monmouth Park that since they took away the whip rule, since they instituted the new whip rule where they can't whip unless it's for corrective measures, and that's a subjective whole nother issue that I don't think we should get into, but what they said was that there are guys there that they're accusing of using buzzers or batteries. And I'm like, wow, you want to hear about the time that a Naira track vet picked up a battery and shocked himself? Watch this. So it was just funny how when we were talking about that, then these allegations came out. Whether they're true or not, who knows? Nobody named any names, just threw out a bunch of allegations on social media. So could be something, could be nothing, don't know. But it was just funny, the timing of it.
As I said last week, who knows? It happened.
Right. Right. No, hey, listen. There's a lot of ugly sides of the game that we love. It's beautiful and there's a lot of good, but there's a lot of ugly sides, and that's one of the ugly parts of it. You know what I mean? There's no way around it. And they've been around a long time. They're probably still around. But let me ask you this on that subject, and as a guy who worked on the gate and watched a lot of the telecasts and whatnot, with the cameras that they have today and all the different angles and the zooms and the high definition and whatnot, I imagine it'd be very hard for a rider to have a battery on them. A lot harder than it was back then.
I'm sure of that. I don't know hard. I don't know how hard it was back then. I don't know how hard it is now, but you're right, with all the cameras and angles, and as you said, high definition.
Right, they can zoom right in, you know what I mean? And remember a couple of years ago, I think it was when Jose Santos won the Derby on Funny Side, the New York Times put that blown up picture of something. I think it was just the crop or something sticking through his thumb or something, and they kind of made a little accusation, and I think he sued him and won.
I'm sorry?
I think he sued them and won, whatever newspaper started that.
Oh, but it certainly, especially if it was not true.
It was not true.
That not Santos, but that would have been a horrible accusation, a false accusation.
Yeah.
And deserves remuneration.
No doubt about it. So let's get right back into some of these great stories. All right. Go ahead. Start. Just start rolling. Where you want to start?
I just want to say we were talking about the gate crew last week, and we worked an 8-man crew. Somebody was sick or hurt at the time, 7-man, but they were at one time, the turnover rate of assistant starters was very slow, like molasses. Once somebody got in position, they were there, so there was, I think in the years that I worked on the gate, maybe there were 15 different assistant starters. One or two came, one or two left while I was there. So if I throw that number out, I could count them. I could have sat down before and count, but I would say 15. I was saying seven of them, eight, 9, 10, maybe 13 or 14, but seven of them are dead, have passed away. And I think the oldest were two guys this year, and then another friend of mine a few years ago, early 70s, and one as young as 50. So anywhere between 50 and 70, early 70s. And this year, and I just wanted to throw this out there, two friends from the gate, good friends, passed away, Jimmy Ciceragas and Richard Brosseau. Both of them were probably the quietest guys on the gate, and, Richie Brosseau was a French-Canadian guy who looked like Paul Bunyan, big, strong, and he never played sports except for hockey, obviously, but he was on the Frank Martin softball team, with me. He was just very athletic. And Jimmy Ciceragas played tailback for Texas A&M in the early 70s. And both of them, very strong, very good assistant starters, very, very nice people, and both passed away this year. So my hats off to both of them. And
condolences to them. Now, let me ask you, Ray, I know, because we're friends, that you're pretty banged up, okay? And we've talked a little bit about this, and it was rough on the gate. You guys, I mean, that was a physical job. I don't think people realize how physical it was. Do you think that, that stress and getting banged up like that could possibly have something to do with them guys, so many guys passing early, or no?
No. Know why I'm thinking about them. They all got sick. It wasn't, something. It was an illness. I've got an illness now that had, nothing to do with the gate, or, I had 2 spinal surgeries that had something to do with the gate, but I also have a neurological situation now that has nothing to do with the gate. And I think Richie died of leukemia. Jimmy fell and, hit his head, and I don't think that had anything to do with the gate. And the others, heart attacks, and get into that. But, 7, so I'm mentioning Jimmy and Richie, and but I don't want to forget the other 5, maybe 6, I don't know, but I think 5. But ironically, the Whitney is coming up in a week or two. And the Whitney of 1981, and I'll tell the people now, they can Google 1981 Whitney Stakes. And I don't know who remembers, but this is
Fiorito, Leslie Ulay. Broke through the gate, New York bred, and won the race anyway. I was watching that race what year was it?
1981, 40 years, the 40th anniversary.
Okay, I was standing on the apron, at Saratoga on the first floor of the grandstand, on the apron, right near the gate when he broke through the gate. And I remember saying, "Oh, that's it. He's done. He got no shot." I didn't think he had a shot anyway. That was a hell of a field.
He had no shot, really, but he did, because he won. But the saying always was, especially amongst jockeys, the kiss of death was when a horse broke through the doors. The horse would never won. Although Slew broke through the doors, and Bob Duncan, I mentioned last week, stayed with him, was able to, bring him back, put him in the gate. I think it was the Jockey Club Gold Cup. I don't remember, what race it was. But Fiorito, a horse that really had no shot, and then he broke through the gate, and he really had no shot. He went on to win. But if you Google 1981 Whitney and go to about 3 minutes, I mean, the first part of it is loading the horses, and right at about 3 minutes, 3:05, he was number 3. I was in with Joni's Chief, who's number 2, and Noble Nashua went in. He was the last horse in, and Marshall Cassidy, because it was front side, you could hear him. He said, he said, and they're all standing very calmly now. As soon as he said that, Fiorito went through the doors, and if you can watch that,
Right.
come out with him, you could see his athleticism, how he twisted and he held on to the horse. The horse ended up winning. He became really good friends with Ray DeStefano, who was the owner. Fiorito ended up going to stud in New York, but like most horses like that who could run with no pedigree, he never really made a good sire. But he won the Whitney. He won like 28 of 50 races in New York. That was his big race, and he only earned only 500 and something $1,000, which I think the Whitney now is maybe $1 million. He would have won that in one. But Jimmy did, that was, and I was standing right next to him. So I had a really good view of it, just as Marshall said, and they're all standing very calmly now. It was just amazing. And they called him out after the race to acknowledge that. I never saw that before.
It was a good, it was a good save. It really was. I remember
it. It was a great save. We've all made saves, but that was as good a save as you'll ever see. And
it's on YouTube. People can look it up. There's two versions. There's a short version of that race, and then like a 5 or 6 minute one. And the 5 or 6 minute one shows the
he's on it, and that's starts at a few seconds after 3 minutes and 5 seconds or whatever. So that one's for you, Jimmy, and Richie, who was he was a strong guy who was usually in the back of the gate to load horses, to tail horses. When you had a bad horse and he had to tail that horse, keep him from flipping, you were happy that he had hands like my computer screen.
Tell everybody what tail a horse is. There are going to be people that are watching that don't know what that is.
Horse is really bad and it flips in the gate. They take the tail. There's somebody obviously inside with him, but then somebody, usually a guy like Sal Gator, who's passed away, or Richie Brosseau, who just passed away, they take the tail and they wrap it around the bar of the back door, so that if a horse tries to rear up, he's anchored. And when sometimes you don't know if a horse flips for the first time, then from then on in, he'll be tailed. But if a horse has a history of that and handling him, you're always happy that you got a guy like Richie or Sal, tailing the horse, because you're secure. But I miss them. May they rest in peace, all 7 of them. And I wanted to just start the show with that, but I guess we got carried away. Richie, Jim, we miss you.
There were 2 guys that are very successful trainers today that were both riders. Okay, one rode a little bit more than the other and had a little bit more success than the other. And I want to talk about experiences that you may have had with either one of them. Okay, because a lot of people don't even realize that they rode. One is on the verge of breaking Dale Bear's record of wins, which is Steve Asmussen, that might even happen at Saratoga. And the other that people don't remember, Wesley Ward. Wesley Ward was a red-hot apprentice, won a lot of races, rode for a lot of people. Lenny Goodman had his book, and Lenny was like this star agent back then because he had Steve Cawthon when he was, quote, the kid.
I retired. Wesley Ward came to the gate in 1984, like a month or 2 after I left the gate. So so
you didn't hear. What about Steve Asmussen?
Steve Asmussen, but ironically, I'm friendly with Wesley's mother, Jean Ward, and she's very proud of her son. Steve Asmussen, very few people know that he rode.
Right.
And
he was big. I remember when he was a bug rider and everyone knew he was Cash's younger brother. I was like, wow, he's bigger than Cash. Cash was big, but I was like, he's bigger than Cash. I don't know how he's going to ride.
Cash was lanky,
right?
Tall, so was Steve. But, last week I mentioned the jockey colony and the Pincais and the Corderos and there was like 5 or 6 jockeys. I was just throwing names out there, but I really just passed over jockeys like like Antley, like Cash Asmussen, like Steve Cawthon, like Gene Kruger, like Ron Turcotte, like Eddie Maple. I mean, there was so many, and I threw so many names out last week, and there's six right there that that I had forgotten. But Cash Asmussen came. I think he won his first race around 1977. I think Sunland Park for his mother. And then he came to New York in 78. And we actually became very good friends off the racetrack also. We did things together socially, Cash and I, because we were both interested in breeding. And that was like a connection. We took rides to farms. He came over, had Italian meals that my mother was born in Italy. He never had food. I say, well, he's got to watch his weight. Forget about it when he comes to my house. But he left. He signed a contract to ride for Stavros Niarchos in '80.
I remember that.
His brother Steve was starting to ride in New York, and he asked me, Raymond, would you do me a favor and keep your eye on my brother? I said, okay. But it was almost like on a daily basis. He didn't ride long, but on a daily basis, every time Steve, the next day, he seemed like he got bigger and bigger and bigger by the day, almost by the race. And, he was taller than Cash. And now look at the size of him, I don't know. I don't know what his record was in New York. He didn't really ride long. Cash was the, and I don't even know, did I mention Cawthon also? Cash was the apprentice, leading Eclipse Award apprentice. Then he won the Golden Whip, which is the big award over in France. And he, a great rider and a good guy, and knows his breeding. He really knows his breeding. But he said, you just watch my brother. I did, but I didn't watch too long because he wasn't there long. He just grew out of himself quickly.
Yeah, you would look at him now. It's hard to even tell that people that don't know would not even think that he rode.
No,
it doesn't look like a rider. But he was big. So how did it start? How did race start at the racetrack? What led you there? How'd you get there?
Before we do, I wanted to just give a shout out to Angel Cordero.
Go ahead.
Like he needs my shout out. But very few people know him as a great rider. Some people say maybe the greatest ever.
He's definitely in the conversation. That's
athletically incredible. But people don't know what a wonderful person he is. And I just want to give you a couple of examples. When I started on the gate in February of '76, you really learn in the morning schooling horses. You're not really allowed or supposed to handle horses in the afternoon until the boss feels you're ready. You learn your lesson in the morning, and you handle a lot of horses in the morning or working out of the gate. But you're not supposed to handle a horse until the boss tells you it's time, So I don't know, 3 weeks later, sometime in March, at that point, you're closing doors in the back, you're tailing horses, you're doing what you can, you're learning, you're watching. And it was 7/8 of a mile in the mile chute at Aqueduct. It was a filly that Jimmy Pacou trained named Royal Saxon. And she was the favorite, and she really wasn't doing much. And got to remember, a lot of these jockeys knew me before I started on the gate because I worked for Pancho. I was Pancho's guy, kid. Pancho was my godfather from the racetrack, my mentor. And so Velasquez, Cordero, they knew me by name because of being with Pancho all those years. So the filly really wasn't doing anything. She never was a filly that needed to be handled. She could stay in the gate by herself. I never know exactly if he did this for me, but she was the favorite. And he turned around, he said, Raymond, come in here with me. And I said, oh, I'm not, to myself, I'm not supposed to. But I said, if Angel Cordero is saying, come in here with me, who am I to say no?
Right.
So and the filly wasn't really doing it, just moving ahead a little bit. And he was enough horseman that was an easy fix for him. And he just said, just take a bite of it and shake it a little bit, get her attention. I think he did that for me. I think I'll never know, because he was so good in the gate. I saw him with horses that really needed to be handled. And she broke sharp. She finished second. And he came back the next race and he said, "You did a good job." That's the kind of guy he was. And another example, and and we're going to try and keep this short, but there's just so much to say. And I have seen this many times with him. Number one, he was always happy. I never saw him mad. Even when he came from Puerto Rico, the Railbirds gave him a hard time, but he was always very upbeat and very generous. He took me and Frank to a boxing match in Madison Square Garden once, and had parties and dances and rented out halls, and his house in Saratoga. He was just he is a very friendly, wonderful guy. But like he did with me, and to this day, I think he did that for me, not for him, just to give me the experience. And then right after that, then I started handling horses. But I'd seen him many times in the gate, waiting for the other horses. He'd be just sitting there, and maybe there'd be an apprentice on the inside or outside of him, and he'd say something to calm the kid down, or maybe say, you don't have enough mane, grab the mane, loosen up the reins a little bit. Here's Angel Cordero, the Mickey Mantle of horse racing, giving some kid batting tips, just telling him. And like with me, maybe just to calm him down, maybe just to give him some confidence. And here in a minute, less than a minute, he's going to be riding against this guy. This guy's going to be trying to beat him, but he's giving him tips. And that's the kind of guy he was. He'd help anybody. And I was always very, very impressed. Big race, big horse, big favorite, however you handle him, he gets left at the gate. As we said last week, things happen. None of the job, only a couple, would come back. He'd never come back. He'd always say, yeah, that happened. She just reared up right at the start. Never blamed anybody. So all these jocks, I loved them all. Two that I didn't really particularly care for, no names, but maybe 200 riders. But Cordero always sticks out in my mind. Velasquez too, and I go with name Jeff Fell, but Cordero was Cordero. There's only one Cordero, and his personality, his athleticism, his riding ability, and I just wanted to get that out there. I don't know why, but it's been on my mind. I might have mentioned that story to you once before about Royal Saxon.
You did, absolutely, you did.
The riders.
I know how you feel about Angel, and I think I've mentioned you to him when I saw him, and the feeling's mutual for sure. So I know you guys go back a long way.
Work very close together,
Yeah,
but all guys, So it's good to be remembered, but they're easy to remember. Very easy to remember. All good guys.
So now, before we run out of time, how did it all start? How did you end up at it? Because you weren't. Your dad didn't work at the track. Your family didn't work at the track.
He did actually.
Oh, he did. Okay, so how did it start? I know.
And on Saturdays, he was a mutual clerk. Back then, 5 kids. My mother didn't work.
Right.
He had 2 jobs. He was a mutual clerk on Saturdays, but didn't know. Had no experience with race horses. But when I was a kid, we moved from Brooklyn, like I thought every Italian American did back in the 50s and 60s. And we moved to Floral Park. Even if we moved to a different section of Floral Park or another town, we looked at houses in other towns. But we bought a house that happened to be 100, 200 yards from the backstretch of Belmont Park, from the training track, from the pony track. And as a kid, maybe 8, 9 years old, we'd either cut a hole in the fence. I guess I can say that the statute of limitations are up, and we'd have a hole we go through, or climb the fence when they kept sewing it up. And they had woods there. And we'd go in. That's where I had my first cigarette. I don't know if I can say this, especially if my daughter's watching. looked at my first Playboy magazine with my friends, and that was our playground. And then in the wintertime, we go across the training track and then across the chute, which was in play. Now it's nothing, right where the match race started.
Right.
We go across the chute, and then there was right there is now the blue field, the blue
Right.
parking. Used to be a pond there that was set down a little bit so we couldn't be seen, and we'd play hockey there. It became like our playground. But I was also interested, in the morning, go out, you hear the horses galloping, you see the steam coming out of their nose, you smell the barn. I was just attracted to it, not my siblings, no one else, and I'd go down to the fence and watch in the morning, go down to the fence and watch. And it was 1980, it's 1962. Now I'm really dating myself. And I knew it was the Belmont Stakes. And I snuck in by myself, went to where I hung out for years as an assistant starter by the 7-8 pole at Belmont. There was those big lilac bushes, and I sat in the bushes and I watched the race. And as they came by, I think Admiral's Voyage was ahead of Jaipur, who went on to win the race. It was actually a 3-horse photo. Jaipur, Admiral's Voyage, and Crimson Satan, which is another segue. He was like more of a speed horse, and he ended up finishing third, a close third in the Belmont, but he became a very good broodmare sire and a speed influence, genetically in breeding. He was the broodmare sire of Royal Academy, the broodmare sire of Mount Livermore. I think he was the champion. And the broodmare sire of Talingua, who was the dam of Stormcat. Right. And that was a great crop. You had Raidan, Jaipur, Admiral's Voyage, Greek Money, Crimson Satan. That was a great crop. Right. But out of all of those really, really good horses from the golden era, the only one who made a mark genetically or in breeding was Crimson Satan. But that really hooked me, that really hooked me. And I was 12, I was too young to work there. Right. But I spent a lot of time down the fence, watching in the morning before school or in the summer. And then, I guess we're running out of time, because the next segment, maybe it's how I got involved. I was with Frank Martin. But I will say this, in 1965, I became enamored with Buck Passer, who was a champion 2-year-old that year. He was trained in Florida by Bill Winfrey. Then he retired. He came to New York.
Eddie Muloy, no?
Muloy took over. Right. So this was like in when they came back from Florida in March, April of '66, right before I started working there. I'd sneak in, and Niloy's barn was all the way over on the other side of, and Belmont is huge, the backstretch. And I went in, and Eddie Niloy, it's just this kid. I mean, I'm so lucky. The people have been so good to me. And I said, can I see Buck Passer? So they were finished training. He took me to see, it was like, and I loved baseball and Duke Snyder and Mickey Mantle, but this was like, I'm standing in front of Buck Passer. I was 15 years old, 16 years, it's not even yet. And I was just so like enchanted. So I knew where the horse was. And at nights a lot in the spring, I would sneak in, and I got to know the night watchman there, an old Irishman named Patty. And I visited Buck Passer many, many times. And little did I know that in a couple of years, he was going to be involved in the race of the century, which we'll get into. But next week, that's how I got started. It was just because that's where my family moved from Brooklyn, not Levittown, not East Meadow, Floral Park, and not even the north side of Floral Park. I wouldn't have seen the horses if I lived any place else in Floral Park. So it just happened to be.
Now, well, we're going to wrap up soon. I know that, but I just want to mention something, because we'll talk about this in the future too. What a lot of people don't know, well, a lot of people don't even know you yet. But another fascinating thing about you is that you are somewhat of a breeding expert and someone who I go to when I have breeding questions. And you have a degree in some ridiculous quantitative genetics, some
Quantitative genetics.
see, I can't even say it, let alone know what it is. Quantitative genetics.
And I'm going to give you the definition.
All right.
If anybody not, they can turn it off now. It's really the study of the hereditary or heritability of traits that are governed by multiple genes, like eye color is not, and hair color is a 1-2 gene. It's traits that are governed by multiple genes and environmental factors, like how many great horses could, or really great because of the environmental factors. They were raised by the best farms. How many horses could have been great horses, but weren't because they didn't get the upbringing. There's a lot of environmental influence that goes into, those traits. And horse racing ability is one. In college, I had to do my paper. My thesis was on the heritability of racing capacity in thoroughbred racehorses. And I think I'm not going to get into numbers. My number might have been a little low. I used a lot of statistics. It's all statistics, but there's definitely, people think, well, the breeding, but there's just so much of an environmental factor that goes into what makes, or what could have made but didn't make, a horse great. Secretary had the breeding, and he was raised. I mean, he had everything going for him, and they call that the phenotype, what you are, and the phenotype is the genotype, your genes, plus the environment. So he was big on the genotype and big on the environment, and I'm getting way off track here, so sorry to the people. Yes, I'm very interested, but that's what I do now.
Right. No, I know.
I'm into breeding.
Right. You've had some success with breeding, and we'll get into that too with how that happened and how you hit a couple of home runs with that, and a lot of fascinating stuff. But
follow racing. I only follow racing because of the stallions that I'm involved in, and I only know their offspring. I really don't know the horses now, the big name horses. And if I miss the Derby, or it doesn't bother me. It's almost like I'm almost burnt out on horse racing, but I love the breeding end of it. I have to. That's my business. That it makes it a lot easier.
So basically, it was a move from Brooklyn to Floral Park, right next to Elmont, right near the chute, that started your career in horse racing, which took you all over the world.
And then Belmont Park, and then Elmont on the other side. So if you walk across Belmont Park and you come out the other end, you're in Elmont. Now they're building over there the where the Islanders are going to play, over in the corner, which to me, it's like, I'm a purist. That's sacred ground. They should be putting a hockey stadium. That's me. And, that could be another argument. We're not going to argue about that.
I agree with you. I'm the same way. So we agree on that.
All Belmont is rolling over in his grave. But, we were going to talk about Frank Martin, but I said that's just too much to combine with how things started and my Asmussen and Cordero stories. And so if that's okay with you.
Yeah, no, we'll wrap this up, and we'll do next week. We'll talk about Pancho. You got a lot of Frank Martin stories. I know you and him were very, very close. He was a much more colorful, generous, interesting guy than a lot of people realize. And he was probably one of the best horsemen ever to train. And, the people today don't realize, and you're going to remember this, Ray, obviously, but back then, in those days, it was an automatic. The leading trainer was Frank Martin. The leading owner was Sigmund Sommer, and then Viola Sommer. And the race was for second.
11 straight, or 10 out of 11 straight years, he won the leading.
Right, the race was for second. It was a gimme. And some years he was just so far ahead. He used to run 6, 7, 8 horses a day. Almost every race he had a horse in. Every level off the claim.
You'll
mean,
have to. I don't.
Dominant.
You'll have to remind me to mention the Petrograd story, which is a great story.
I know the story, and you'll mention that one because that kind of tells the kind of guy he was.
People don't. 2 things, and then I'll let you go. I promise. And I'm Italian. It's so hard to talk, without using my hands. So I'm going to try.
I have the same problem, so I understand.
Sat on my hands, I wouldn't be able to talk, and I think that's true. 2 things. When the Secretariat movie came out, he was really, really hurt, because it portrayed him in a real sleazy way. That wasn't him at all. Yeah, he was rough and gruff, but he had a big raw, but a big heart. And if he liked you, he couldn't do enough for you. And we'll get into that. And just ironically, the other day, and I'm friends with Jim Belden, who was a firm's vet, but he did a lot of Frank Martin's work. And he said, we were talking about Pancho, and Dr. Belden said, Pancho made you, no matter what you are, groom, hot walker, exercise boy, veterinarian, he made you step your game up. He made everybody move their game up, whatever they did, he made you better. He made you be better,
Yeah, he was a great horseman, man. He really was.
Well, again, I don't mean to. I get carried away. Last week we went too far. I promised I'd be watching the clock, which I am, and I still went over. But now we kind of set the table for some Frank Martin stories and let people really get to know a lot about him.
Yeah,
I hope.
Yeah, no, for sure. We'll start with Pancho next week and how he hooked you up and how close you guys got, and some of those great stories. And there's a whole bunch I know that you can't tell or won't tell about him, but we'll stick to the ones that you can. So thank you, everybody.
Nothing illegal,
No, I know that. I know. Just
water and oats, but
right.
He could be gruff,
right.
But he was the most generous person I ever met in my life. And if he liked you, as I said, he couldn't do enough. And people knew that. And but anything that I don't say, it has nothing illegal or immoral or unethical. It's just things that there's so many stories that there's easy to leave some out.
I get it. All right, Ray. We'll be chatting again next week. We'll get into some fun stuff for sure.
I look for it, and again, I really do appreciate. I feel like somebody's given me a chance to get this all out. I've been sitting here, no one in my family, nobody. I do have some friends that like my stories, but you're giving me a chance to really, as you said, instead of writing a book, I should be so, honored to think that we could write a book. But, there's so much great stuff in here that I have to say would have made a good book to racetrack people.
No doubt about it. But we'll get it all out there, and it'll be fun this way too. So,
okay.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. We will be back with more of Ray DeStefano next week. We got a lot more fun stuff with Ray coming, and just a lot of stuff that you'll enjoy. I know a lot of these stories already, and a lot of the things that we're going to talk about, so I'm excited about it. I know Ray is. Thanks for tuning in, and ciao for now.
Cloud computing outside, classic Empire, head-to-head down to the line. Cloud computing wins the Preakness.
Nobody does it better.